And Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the word is at 1 minute to midnight, having run down the clock on waiting to combat climate change. He was speaking as world leaders gather for the landmark COP26 climate change conference in Glasgow. Mr. Johnson said leaders needed to move from aspiration to action to slow global warming. He added the summit was a critical moment for him and said an ambitious outcome was still in the balance.
Pursuing efforts towards 1.5. The rapidly changing climate is sounding an alarm to the world to step up on adaptation, to address loss and damage, and to act now to keep 1.5 alive. And we know that this COP26, is our last best hope to keep 1.5 in reach. Now, I know that we have an unprecedented negotiations agenda ahead of us, but I believe that this international system can deliver. It must deliver. And as COP President, I am committed to promoting transparency and inclusivity, and I will lead this conference in accordance with the draft rules of procedure and with the utmost respect for the party-driven nature of our process.
It is very, very urgent for not just for our country, for the whole world. And if I had to give a comparison, I'd say it was a 1 minute to midnight moment, and the clock is ticking. We have to get everybody to do more. We've made some progress at the G20. There's no doubt about it.
If we are thinking for some reason one segment will perish, another will be saved, we are deluding ourselves, because we are facing this existential problem together.
Environmentalist Elizabeth Gulugulu joins me on the news from Glasgow via Zoom. Good to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
So talk to us. You are in Glasgow. Talk to us about what's going on there now before we get to the very subject of climate change. Talk to us about what you've heard and what you've seen so far in Glasgow, Scotland.
What I've seen so far today being the World Leaders Summit, people are looking forward and expecting for their demands to be met. COP26 started yesterday, and yesterday you could see that there were a lot of people, really discussing about their expectations, the need for huge emitter countries to show more ambitious targets in terms of reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. So everyone is just hopeful, but at the end of it all, people are just saying it could be another talk show. So we're just waiting to see how it goes.
And one of the commitments we're getting from world leaders is the willingness, or at least there is a level of willingness to stop financing coal power overseas, but little or no commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions in their own countries. What do you make of this?
Well, I think this is the problem that we are currently having, because most of these developed countries, they are not investing into their coal plants, but they want to invest into African coal plants. And if we are now talking about ambitious targets, no matter whatever or wherever you're investing, we just do not want another expansion of coal plants, but we want them to at least invest into renewable energy sources like solar power, like hydroelectric power. But which is why people are sort of like demanding for their ambitious goals, because normally what is on the paper and what they are saying, it does not make sense if they are not acting on it. So people, they just want what they promised to act on it. It's now more about action, not what more is on the paper and what they are telling us in those long speeches.
So there is also the call from Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying that the word is at 1 minute to midnight. We've heard statements like this before, but it just doesn't seem to move the needle in terms of the commitments we're seeing from the world leaders. How bad is this situation? 1 minute to midnight, it does sound like, look, we are at the tipping point. That's what it sounds to me.
Indeed, we are at the tipping point. I mean, I'm sure the floods that happened in Germany, it's a good example. The floods that have been happening in China, that is a good example. Even the droughts that are constantly happening in most African countries, that is a good example. The Arctic is melting. We are running behind time. Actually, we no longer have time. But like what I'm saying, all these speeches, they do not reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's now time for action. If they say we are 1 minute before midnight, then what actions are you going to do in order for you to be well prepared in terms of adaptation measures, in terms of mitigation measures, and making sure that vulnerable communities are well secured, vulnerable communities are well catered for. So indeed, there is no time. And people might think this is a joke, but we have left our homes to come and follow these negotiations, to come and advocate for better results, to come and make sure that the negotiations go well, because no one is happy with the current situation at hand.
Do you think, because sometimes people say that these leaders are unwilling and unwilling to follow through with their commitments, great speeches, but back home, no implementation. Do you think that the unwillingness is really about maybe financing or more about skepticism? You just talked about the fact that it's not a joke. Some people do not believe in the science. What would you say to those who are skeptical about climate change and all its hazards?
Yeah, we have countries like China. They did not come or commit to the World Leaders Summit. And now the point we are at is not a point whereby you believe or not, because things will just happen unexpectedly. Nobody knew that Germany was going to be affected by droughts, by floods, but it's something which happened unexpectedly. There were cases and reports of heat waves affecting parts of England. Nobody expected that. So the situation we are in, it's not a matter whether you believe in science or you don't believe in science, because if it does not affect you, it might affect your children. If it does not affect your children, your friends or your relatives somewhere else could be affected. So if you don't believe in science, the science is clear. Even if you don't believe in science, figures, they do not lie. The IPCC report was launched a few months back, and it actually highlights that we have reached at the tipping point. And even the UN Secretary General announced that this is the code red report, meaning that we need ambitious actions. It's no longer about ambitious targets, but it's now about ambitious actions, whether you believe or not, but we do not have time. Facts and results and figures, they do not lie.
African leaders are also expected to speak at this conference. For example, the president of Nigeria will be speaking Tuesday, which is tomorrow. But we know that Africa really has very low carbon footprint. All the same, it really has, the climate change has had great impact on the continent, even more than any other continent. What do you expect to hear and see from African leaders at the summit and after the summit?
I mean, there is great importance for African leaders to be well coordinated, because we are all experiencing the pain. We are all being affected by the effects of climate change. There are issues to do with the just transition, whereby us as Africans, we are saying, you know what, we are contributing less, yet we are being affected more. Therefore, we demand for developed countries to invest so that there is a smooth transition, from coal to hydroelectric power. There is need for a smooth transition, and that transition should be financially be supported by the developed countries. So there is need for great coordination amongst African leaders. It's not a one man's conference. We need African countries to be coordinated. They really need to demand for climate justice, for financial flows, in order to improve in terms of adaptation and mitigation measures.
So you talked about coordination, And when you look at how the world handled the COVID-19 pandemic, there was large coordination, information. We got information at time, although there was misinformation at some point, but we got a lot of information needed. There was the World Health Organization coordinating activities. I mean, we had the vaccine in less than a year. Why do you think we're not seeing that level of coordination among world leaders when it comes to the climate change, which has more devastating impacts, by the way?
Because we are not treating climate change like a pandemic. Climate change itself, it's a pandemic. Even though the people do not die instantly, but they do die, a lot of them, due to floods, due to hunger, due to malnutrition. All these are deaths that are related to climate change. So, which is why I'm saying there is greater need for coordination, and it is the right time whereby we want the world leaders to treat climate change as a pandemic, and to put their heads together the same way they did put their heads together in fighting against COVID-19. But also, you know, we are always demanding for climate finance. We are always requesting, saying that we want money to be invested into African countries. We also need to come up with strong financial structures. If that money comes, are we ready? Issues to do with corruption, are they not going to affect us? Is the money going to reach out to the most vulnerable people that really need that money? So as Africans, in as much as we are going to be coordinated, it has to be narrowed down. Our financial institutions should be strong. Accountability, transparency is of great importance in fighting the climate change crisis.
And what sort of commitment would you want to see? What sort of commitment would you see that would be satisfying for you in terms of dealing with the scourge of climate change from Glasgow?
My commitment definitely will be, you know, huge financial investments that are youth-friendly, because I believe the solution to the climate crisis is youth. Young people are energetic. Young people, they are tech-savvy. They are innovative. They can come up with the great innovations to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. They can come up with great projects in terms of promoting plant-based diets. You know, so much investment should be channeled towards young people because they still have the energy to make things work. This is the hope that we have. So if financial flows are there and if they are youth-friendly, whereby young people can actually get to access these resources without a number of stumbling blocks, I feel like we would have won this battle. They need to be given a seat at the table. They need to be consulted and be treated as stakeholders, as rights holders, so that they can come up with greater innovations. They can come up with more ideas that can actually build resilience in different countries.
The world is watching right now, and we're hoping that the global leaders can take the lead in terms of curbing the effects of climate change. Environmentalist Elizabeth Gulugulu, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.